Good morning, good afternoon, everyone joining today to the Tableau Prep user group. It's great to have you all here. It seems like from the chat we've got a couple of first timers, so it's great to see. We've got two great speakers for you today, but before I introduce those, I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro to the session for those that haven't joined before. So the Tableau Prep user group is led by myself and Jenny Martin, who is a colleague of mine from the Information Lab here in London. So I set up the Prep user group in February last year, and I've recently brought Jenny on board to help run and oversee the sessions as well. So you'll be seeing her around a lot more frequently. You may recognize Jenny as she has actually presented at the user group twice before. So Jenny, do you want to give a little intro to yourself?
Yeah, hey, not much more to add to that. But yeah, I also help run Prep and Data, so that might be where some might know me from as well. But yeah, it's great to be on board and looking forward to the talks today as well.
Perfect. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. This session is being recorded. So that will be uploaded to Tableau's YouTube channel tomorrow. So if you need to drop off for any reason, or you want to share this session with others or catch up later, then you'll be able to do so. We'll share the link with you. And we can also get the speakers to share their resources with you after the session. So if there's anything you want to, catch up on or revisit, then we can give that to you. During the sessions, we will take some questions to the speakers that you can submit. If you'd like to submit a question, can you please do so in the Q&A box? So at the moment, we're posting in the chat where everyone's dialing in from, which is great. And we welcome any general chats or comments during the sessions. But if you have a specific question that you'd like to ask myself or Jenny or one of the speakers, then put that in the Q&A, as that's what we'll be monitoring. We will try to get through all of them. They won't all go direct to the speakers. Some will be answered directly in the sessions, but that's where you want to head to if you've got a question for the speakers. So just an announcement from us. If you come to these sessions regularly, you'll know that they're always at this time. At 4 p.m. UK time, and that's to accommodate most of Europe and the US. But we're actually taking the user group slightly more global. So we're partnering up with some people in the APAC region. So some of the user groups will now be shown live to accommodate that time zone as well. So the user groups will still be as frequent, so they'll still be every 2 months. But some of those may be a sort of European APAC mix of time zones. Some of them may be as they are now, so Europe and the US, and some of them will be APAC and the US. So we'll be mixing them up a little bit more. So you're going to hear speakers from all over the world, because at the moment, as I say, it's Europe and US mainly. We've actually got Nik from South Africa today, so we've gone a bit further ashore, but that's just an update. So you guys know coming forward, and there'll be full details on that announced when it's all finalized, because in all honesty, we haven't completely finalized it yet, but it is happening. Something else, which if you're a regular, you will know about this, but we always have new attendees to these sessions. So if you want to get involved in some free Tableau Prep training, the Information Lab run sessions every Thursday. So it's called TTT, Thursday Training at 3, and that is free. So it's a 90-minute session on a whole range of topics, actually. So we do training in Tableau Desktop, in another software we partner with, Alteryx, and also Tableau Prep. So we have a learning path for Tableau Prep. So it starts 1 week, and then the subsequent weeks build upon those sessions. So if you head to that link there, till.bi prep TTT sign up, you'll be able to sign up for the first session of the new learning path, which starts in just over a month on the 9th of September. So we restart the trainings for prep sort of in line roughly with the user groups to allow people to sign up. But if you're just starting off your prep journey or you're a bit more intermediate, you can go and find the session for you. I'll actually put a link in the chat, or maybe Jenny, you could do that, of the prep learning path where we've got the visualization that will which will show you when each session starts. So you may just want to join the advanced session, and it gives you a link to see when that is. So enough from me. The speakers today. So we have Pat Lucas from the Information Lab, who's going to be talking us through some neat prep tips and tricks. So if you're new to the tool, you'll probably pick up a lot from this session, but I find whenever people do these sessions and I'm watching, I'm always picking up new pointers and new ways to tackle things in prep. So I think it'll be a really valuable session. And then following on from Pat, we've got Nik, who will be joining us to talk about his sort of journey with prep and how prepping data has almost helped him to rediscover the tool recently. So I'm excited to hear about that as well. This is a slightly different order to what you may have seen on the sign-up page, but we just swap things around as I think it flows slightly better. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Pat, who's going to take us through his tips and tricks session. So Pat, if you want to take over sharing your screen from me.
Sure.
We can get
Thanks very much, Jack.
No worries.
I think you need to stop sharing before I can share.
Sorry.
Great. Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, good afternoon, those that are in the afternoon. I know there are many people from around the world, so welcome to you all. Very excited to be chatting to you today and taking you through some Tableau Prep tips and tricks. So I'm also a part of the Information Lab, like both Jack and Jenny, and I've been at the Information Lab since January of this year. So I've been using Prep for about 8 months, and yeah, I'm excited to share with you what I've got today. And it's actually quite funny, Jack, that you said you still pick up things from these kind of sessions, because even as I was preparing the session and including all the kind of bits and bobs that I knew, I was finding new things as well. And I think it's quite valuable sometimes to actually just delve into prep, and instead of just looking for the end result, which we so often do, to actually look around for, or just to investigate with different functionalities of prep. So hopefully you see as you go along a few new things. Some of you will be familiar with a lot of them. Hopefully I can actually still teach you quite a few things from the session. So the first tip is going to involve the input tool, and it's going to be looking at what we can do in the input tool just to reduce some load times. So quite often in your clean step, so this horizontal line is the clean step, you might exclude fields that you don't need. You might change data types, you might rename fields. But what you may not know is that this can actually all be done in the input tool. So this here is the input tool. So I've connected to my data source and brought that into the pane. And just by deselecting some of these fields here, that can automatically filter out those fields so that they're not flowing through your workflow. And this is really useful when, for example, you might have a large number of rows and a large number of fields, and you already know which fields you want to get rid of and you don't want to include. And by removing them at the first step, that means they're not running through the workflow, and that will speed up your workflow runtime. So we can deselect fields here. We can also change the data type. So if you just see here, we can see the number icon and the string icon. We can just, if we wanted to, change those data types at its source. The third thing I'll show you just here is we can actually change the name. So if you double click under the field name, you can just change that to anything you like. And that will pull through into your clean step. The last bit here I'm going to show you is this data sample tab on the left-hand side. So a lot of the time if you have, say, hundreds of thousands or even millions of rows, in your results canvas that you see at the bottom here as you look through your workflow, Tableau Prep will just show you a sample. So if you're looking to, say, spot check or fact check a particular value, sometimes it won't be there, and that's because Tableau Prep is just using a sample. You can check this option to use all data. However, if you do have millions of rows, that will increase load times, and you could be waiting minutes, even tens of minutes for things to load. So often it's best practice to keep it on default sample, or the default sample, so that it just gives you a sample throughout your workflow. But you can, just to be aware, you can use all data when going through that. Awesome. So the next tip I'm going to show you is copying changes. So we've made some changes in this input tool, and say you wanted to make some of these changes, but not all of them in another. All you need to do is right click on the change. So you go to your changes tab and select that specific change, select copy, and then go to another input tool, go to your changes tab, and you can simply, you should be able to, sorry, maybe you can't do it in the input tool, but say we go to our clean step and remove a field. So we've made a change. Copy the change from that clean step, and we can paste it in our other clean step. So that's really useful when, like I said, you want to just copy some changes over, but not all. The only caveat with this is you can't copy multiple fields at once, which is quite annoying. And hopefully Tableau Prep can develop on that so you can copy multiple at the same time. Great, so moving on, we're going to look at grouping. And you can group your data in many different ways. So this data source just has two fields, country and city. And as you can see, there are a lot of misspellings within both columns. In our results, in our sample canvas at the bottom, we can hit the ellipsis, there's 3 dots, go to our group values, and there we can see multiple options for grouping our values in a field. So the first one I'm going to start with is pronunciation. And just by selecting pronunciation, it automatically groups it according to a sensitivity. Now the sensitivity line's at the top. Going further down, reducing the sensitivity will often create more fields, not in this case. If we increase the sensitivity, it will reduce the number of fields and try and group more values together. In this case, it worked quite nicely, apart from it picked up the wrong spelling for England, but that can just be changed by double clicking and retyping the value for England. I'm just going to remove that change so I can show you the next one. Again, we'll go to our ellipsis, go to group values, and now we're going to look at common characters. So we'll select common characters. This time we don't have a sensitivity line. It's picked up some changes. So if we see this paperclip icon, that means it's grouped some values here. So if we select England, we can see the 2 values it selected. If we want to amend the grouping, so we can use this common characters grouping and then amend it, we can highlight specific values we want to group and then select group. So using these manual selection, using the common characters or pronunciation is a really good starting point, but it might not always give you the desired results that you're after. Again, I'll show you a third one. So we can do it by spelling. Now, of course, there's a lot of spelling errors in this. Just like with pronunciation, we have a sensitivity line, so we can ramp up the sensitivity. However, we'll see a bit of an error here because we've lost the values for Spain. For some reason, they've appeared in France, and I think that's just because there are quite a few common characters between the spellings of Spain and the spellings of France. So it's really important when you do automatic groupings like this to check what values have actually grouped, because there can often be some incorrect ones. My most preferred way of grouping is just to do a manual grouping. So from your canvas, you can just select those that you want and group them. So we can select them, we right click, and then we can select our group values. This isn't always the best way, because if you have a number of different values, it's very tedious to go through and try and ensure you group all the correct values together. You'll be prone to human error as well. So sometimes a mixture of the methods that I've shown you will work a treat. Awesome. I'm just going to move on to the next one. We're going to be looking at filtering your data. So there's a number of ways we can filter our data. The quickest one is just to highlight a specific value, right click and choose either keep only or exclude. So if we keep only, it will just keep that individual value. If we exclude it, it will just exclude that individual value. And you can do that, just like with grouping, you can do that for multiple at a time. So you just need to right click and select either keep only or exclude. Again, if we go to the ellipsis like we did with the grouping, sorry, I just realized I'm on the grouping still. We can select filter, and then we can see our various filter options. So we can filter by calculation. So for example, we might want to keep all the countries that begin with E. So if we had other countries, maybe Ethiopia or Eritrea included as well, we might just want to filter to those countries. Alternatively, if we had sum or profit values, we might just want to filter to those values that are greater than 100 or greater than 200, for example. Selected values is what I've just shown you. It's basically just a tick box exercise. Select the ones you want to keep or even exclude. The other option, you can do a wildcard match. So with the wildcard match, once you select it, you get these various options. You can choose whether the values contain certain characters, or start with a character or ends with a character, or an exact match. So if we typed in England as an example, we would get 2 values that contain the word England. However, if we chose exact match, we would just get the value England, because England with 2 Ds on the end obviously isn't the exact match. There's also an option to filter null values, so you can either just keep or exclude null values, but we don't have any null values in this set, so we won't be going through that. Great, so my next tip involves unions. Well, actually, a quick one that I've noticed is you can actually zoom in and zoom out of your flow. So say you've got a really large flow and you kind of want to see the bigger picture of it, you can use this bottom right panel to zoom in and out, just to give you a better view of what you're seeing. And because we've got quite a tall one here, I'll just zoom out a bit for us. So to give you a bit of context of what we're seeing here, we're pulling through data structured in the same way for various different countries. So if we just have a look at that, we've got month and we've got sales for each country. Now, we want to union all these together. One way we can do this is by pulling each data file in and just unioning them all together. However, this uses quite a lot of space on your canvas, can be quite distracting for the eye, and it can cause a bit of confusion if you're passing it on to someone else. They might not quite be able to understand exactly what's going on. So we can use a different method called a wildcard union to eradicate this issue. So I'm going to go into my wildcard union. And at the moment, we're pulling through a sheet called just Austria. Down here on the sample results, we can see an option for single table or wildcard union. So at the moment, the single table is just the table for Austria. If we select wildcard union, we're giving a number of options. So I'm just going to bring my file explorer down so you can see exactly what is going on. So the wildcard union searches in a specific folder, and that folder at the moment is called simple wildcard union, which I've titled here, and we can see the number of, or the various different sheets that are involved. We can choose whether to include or exclude specific sheets, or exclude files, include and exclude specific sheets, and we also have this matching pattern. So a matching pattern is essentially going to bring through any fields that are attributed to a specific pattern. So in this example, there is no exact pattern that links all of these sheets together. Austria is very different to Brazil, which is very different to England. There's no characters we can include that will pull them all through. But because they're all in the same folder, what we can just use is an asterisk. So if we do an asterisk.xlsx, that will bring through every single sheet within that specific folder that you're calling up here. Once you do that, you can see the sheets that are going to be included down the bottom. If you're happy with what's going to be included, click apply, and then have a look at your results. It might take a bit longer to load just because there's a bit more data pulling through. But essentially what we're going to get is the months, the sales, and the various file paths. So you can see the name of all those sheets that were included in that folder. And this will make it having this involved or included in your workflow will make it easier to filter, easier to group, and do exactly what you need to do with your data. I want to show you a second wildcard union just using that functionality for the matching pattern and doing something a little bit different with it. So in this scenario, we're using a different folder. So here we have values for Austria, France, and Spain, but we also have yearly values for Wales. And that's all we want to pull through. We would just want to pull through the sheets that begin or that are titled with Wales in them. We want to make sure we don't include Austria, France, or Spain. So at the moment, we're just pulling through Wales 2016, but we want to just pull through, Wales 2016 plus all the rest of the years up to 2021. So our matching pattern, instead of just being an asterisk, is going to be Wales space. Then we can include the 20. We don't need to, but all of them begin Wales space 20. So that's what we'll do. And then actually, what I forgot to mention is we do still need to include the asterisks. So at the moment, what we're saying is we want to pull through a sheet that's called Wales 20. We want to pull through a sheet that's called Wales 20, then anything after that. So it can be 16, 17, it can even be X, Y, Z. So to do that, we use the asterisk again, because the asterisk just pretty much means any character. Then down the bottom, again, we see the included files. I just see the Wales file, so I'm happy. So I'm going to select apply. Go to my clean step just to see that they've pulled through. This green bar that's running from left to right across the top just shows that it's loading. So we'll give that a second. And there we have it. We can see our various file paths with our different Wales sheets. Great. I'll move on to joins. So I'll just zoom in a bit more. So you might be familiar with the sample superstore dataset that comes with Tableau Desktop when you download it. So we've got our orders and we've joined that to people. So people looks a little bit like this. It's just got a region and the person. So the person is just the area manager for each region. So we're just performing a join on those on region, just so we have the area manager included. The returns data set includes all the order IDs that have been returned. But I want the resulting outcome to include just order IDs that haven't been returned. So what I'm doing is joining the returns sheet onto my already created join. And Tableau already naturally picks up the order ID. It naturally picks up fields that are named the same, which is quite useful. Maybe not in some cases, but in this case, it's very useful. And at the moment, it's performing an inner join, which means we're just keeping those order IDs that are returned, but we just want the order IDs that are not returned. So in a join field, or in the join tool, in this canvas down the bottom, we have the option here to select the join type. So we can select each area of the Venn diagram to either choose a left join, we can either choose a full join, we can choose a right join. You can literally do whatever you want. And in this case, we just want a left join that doesn't include the center. because in the center are those order IDs that were returned. So we're just including the left only. And that's just the tip there, the various different types of joins that you can produce. So when you're joining, a lot of people always think about the inner join, what the primary key that you're joining on. In this case, order ID is the primary key, but actually there's quite a lot of different things you can do with a join. Great, so moving on. Now we're going to look at data roles. So data roles are very often geographical roles. So we're looking at like cities, countries, postcodes, etc. And usually when you pull through countries and cities into Tableau Prep, they're recognized as strings. But it's actually a good way to spell check as well, as you'll see in a second. We want to associate the city to a geographical role. To do that, we can go to the data type in the top left. And we can see the various data types, but down the bottom, we can also see an option for data role. You can have a URL role. So that's if you're including some sort of link or a website or an email, which speaks for itself. The option we're going to use is geographic, and you get various options. As I said, you've got your city, your country, states, airports, lots of different options. We're going to select city. And what you'll see here is a number of exclamation marks. And that's because Tableau Prep doesn't recognize some of these values as cities. So this is actually quite helpful when we come to group values. We can see what the value should be, i.e. London. And then we can see other values within the field that are similarly spelt but don't actually quite match to a city. We can do the same with country, so we can set the geographical role of a country. Annoyingly, England's not recognized as a country. I think it only recognizes the United Kingdom, so you'd have to be aware of that, but it still recognizes France and recognizes Spain. Great, so my last tip for you is going to look at grouping steps. Now, grouping steps is really useful when you have a really, really large workflow. Granted, this workflow at the bottom isn't that large, but just imagine it is. And maybe you have to perform a series of steps, maybe 3 or 4 steps, just to produce one small little side outcome. What you can do, just to reduce the number of, or reduce the canvas space that you use, reduce the distraction on the eye, is actually group these steps together. So I've just performed really random bits in each of these steps, so they're not important. But what you need to do is just highlight them all by using the Control or the Shift key and just selecting each step you'd like to group. Once they're highlighted, or another way you can highlight it is lassoing them. So if you just click anywhere on the canvas and drag, and just ensure you drag over the tools that you want to include, you can do that. Right click and group. So now we have a group called group 3. We can give it a bit of annotation just to explain what's going on. And annotation is also really good when you're building large workflows, so that when you come back to it in 2 or 3 months, if you leave it alone, you can understand exactly what you did. Another reason annotations are great are when you're passing workflows across to someone else, it helps them gain a much better understanding a lot quicker of exactly what you've been up to in your data prep. So that's the last tip from me. Thank you very much for sticking around and listening, and I'll hand back over to Jack.
Hey, Pat, thanks so much for that. I've got a couple of questions that have come through for you, if you're happy to answer those.
Sure, let's go.
Cool. So from Daniel, we've got a question around what in the input steps. So if you're using the sample option, when you run the workflow, does the output also contain only that sample, or does the full data source get included in the output?
So the full data source will be included in the output. The sample is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's just Prep's way of making things run a bit quicker. Yeah, so, but the problem with the sample is if you're trying to fact check for us, say you want to search for London or something, and that's not included in your sample because you've got so many rows, the search won't return London, which means you know, it's had me worried before because I've thought I've lost some data and I actually haven't. But when you do output your data in an output step that looks like this, it will include all the data.
Brilliant. Thanks for clarifying that, Pat. Now coming to another question around the input steps. So when you're renaming a field in the input step and maybe you change the data source to a different one, what effect does that have? And basically, when you're changing that data source, is the only way that you do it by deleting that input step and bringing in a new one? Some clarification around that would be helpful.
My way of tackling that would be to copy the changes across. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought you could copy changes from an input to another input. I've come across issues with that.
Yeah, I've genuinely, this was new to me. This is the thing that I picked up from your demo. Actually, I've never done copying changes before, but that's so useful. So I'm definitely going to be taking that. It makes sense that you would be able to copy it from an input to an input. But maybe it was just the perils of a live demo.
Yeah, maybe. That's my way in the past has definitely been to copy the changes across. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my answer.
I think that sounds like a logical thing to do. And then everyone was very enjoyed your Wildcard Union demo. There's quite a lot of questions that came through around that. So for example, if there was another file in the folder with a different country name, would that be picked up as well?
So it depends on your configuration. So in this instance, when we used Wales 2.0, it wouldn't, because we're looking for any sheet or any file that's named with Wales 2.0, then something on the end, and that something on the end is denoted by the asterisk. Sorry, I know it's small. I don't know how to increase the size of the sample canvas at the bottom. With our Wildcard Union at the top, if you just ensure that all the files you have in a single folder you want to pull through, regardless of the name of the country, if you just use that asterisk, then that will pull through everything. So as you'll see in the clean step, it's pulled through files from Austria, Brazil, England, etc. So just ensure you don't have anything lurking in the folder that you don't want to include, and then it will kind of do its magic for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for answering all those questions, Pat. I think that's been really useful to everyone, and we'll keep answering the extra questions in the live Q&A. But for now, Pat, you can sit down, and we'll hand over to Nik for his talk.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Just bear with me. I will share my screen momentarily. Okay, perfect. Can I just get a check that you guys can see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jenny. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Pat, very much for the talk. I definitely picked up a whole bunch of things while I was going through that. You'll see we've gone through the technical expert, and now we'll go through the PowerPoint and learning the tool person in me. But hi, everybody. It's great to be with you this afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks, Jenny and Jack, for the opportunity to present to you today. So really, I'm here to share with you a little bit about my Tableau Prep learning experience this year, and also to touch on where I see prep playing a role in the local South African market. But before that, let me just introduce myself to you properly. So a little bit about me. I'm Nik Everleigh. Despite my accent, I'm a proud Welshman from the Rhymney Valley in the UK. So I was very pleased to see lots of Welsh data coming into Pat's talk. I landed a job in London in my early 20s, and then after 10 years, I met a girl from South Africa, and I popped across to Johannesburg to get married. And 15 years later, I'm still here, albeit I've moved a little bit further south down to Cape Town. I've been in the data and analytics space for over 20 years. I know it's hard to tell from my youthful photo, and in a variety of different roles. And I'm now part of the tech team at Slipstream Data. We're a small consultancy with some big partnerships, including Tableau and Alteryx. And my role and passion is really to help people build data confidence and data culture. I spend a lot of time using Tableau Desktop, and I'm quite active within the Tableau Challenge community, things like Prepping Data, which we'll come on to, and Wildcard Wednesday. And I'm also a Tableau user group leader here in Cape Town. My contact details are all here, and I'm sure all this will be shared, but I'm fairly active on a lot of the platforms. I love connecting with people, talking about data or anything else, to be honest. So feel free to contact me on any of those. And I've summed myself up on a personal level as a runner of hills, a writer of words, and a father of nutcases. I can expand on this a little below my sort of blatant Tableau Public plug. There are my nutcases. I've got 2 kids, a boy and a girl, 11 and 8. That's us up on Table Mountain. It was quite nice. That was the day we walked up a little section and then went in the cable car. Most of the time, I'm doing it more on foot with the pictures we have at the bottom. I spent a lot of time on the mountain. There's a little picture of me I took up running in my late 30s. And that was my 3rd finish in an event called the Puffer, which is a 80-kilometer ultra marathon here, which is kind of my proudest running achievement. I think it coincided with having kids, because I think I get out of the house a lot now. But yeah, I'm very, very lucky to be able to do it and live where I live. But even though I feel like I've managed to achieve some things, fortunately a long career and a lovely wife and kids, and I've finished ultra marathons. I've even got a short story into print, hence my writer of words. But it all pales into insignificance compared to one thing which has recently happened to me, which is undoubtedly my greatest achievement, which is that I've managed to sneak my way onto the Prep and Data leaderboard. I had to crop this picture sort of quite a lot and zoom in just so that I could kind of cling on to the bottom part of the page. But that's something that it's relevant to today, because it's really been something I've spent a bit of time doing this year. For those of you who don't know about Prep and Data, Jenny is one of the people who runs it. It's a weekly data challenge that you can solve in Tableau Prep or in a tool of your choice. And for me and for everyone, I think it's a fantastic way to learn. And it's certainly been instrumental in me using the tool over the course of the year. So a big thanks to Jenny for that, and also to Carl Olchin and Tom Price for their weekly time and efforts. But before I talk any more and have a look at sort of things in prep and where I've gone with my journey, I think I'd like to rewind a bit, because part of my sort of basis for today was about rediscovering Tableau Prep. So maybe I can give a little bit of context. So through the magic of PowerPoint, let's imagine we've gone back 3 years. We're in 2018. And for me, that's three years, 2 jobs and a pandemic ago. I'm working for a Tableau partner, but I'm not really getting the product exposure and support that I need. And while I was there in my latter days, I heard about a thing called Project Maestro, which later became to be known as Tableau Prep and Tableau Prep Builder. I didn't really pay it much attention, to be fair. I probably should have, but I could understand why Tableau entered the space. There was a perceived strength around Click and Microsoft and others around the data preparation features. But to me at the time, it really did seem as just a little sweetener, a little extra to give a little bit of a broader sense within the Tableau space of sort of bringing data from sources and dropping it into Tableau. Shortly after that, I changed companies and did very little Tableau work for a long time, apart from one client, but I kept my desktop skills up via things like Wildcard Wednesday. But I really did mostly forget about Tableau Prep. And then if we sort of forward a little bit further to the end of last year, around November time, when I moved to Slipstream, Tableau became my primary focus again, and which was very exciting for me. I was very happy for it to be the case. And I was asked to do a 2-week Ultrix trial and to certify just prior to joining. I think they were just testing to see if my old brain still worked and that I wasn't lying about things on my CV. But it switched on a dormant kind of ETL and data cleansing part of my brain. I've done many roles in the data space, and ETL and data movement was a long period of that, but quite a few years past. And while I was sort of getting the spark around moving data again, I spotted the Prep in Data hashtag cropping up quite a bit on Twitter. I think Donna Coles is probably where I saw it via. I was following her for sort of Workout Wednesday and her solutions. And if you were the eagle-eyed among you will have seen she was a lot higher on the leaderboard for Prep in Data than me. She's been doing it a long time. So I'd seen this sort of thing out there, wondered what it was. And then, like all good people in early January, I decided to set myself some ridiculous goals for the year. And mine was I was going to do the Makeover Monday project, both flavors of Workout Wednesday and Prep in Data every week, which taught me quite a bit about myself, notably that I'm far too fussy and finicky to find the time for Makeover Monday every week, even though I really enjoyed it. But I think I'm staying on top of the others just about. I'm a little bit behind on Workout Wednesday. I need to do a bit of work, but I'm pretty much there with Prep in Data, and I've really enjoyed it, and it's led to me now using Tableau Prep far more often than I had for a long period of time. So there's a lot of things that I like about Tableau Prep, a lot of things that I love. I've listed some key points here, but I think what I'll do, rather let me jump across to the tool quickly, because I think it's a little bit more illustrative than kicking around in PowerPoint. So here we are in Tableau Prep. I just want to get some notes up briefly. So again, I think a lot of you, no doubt on the session today, are probably experienced in the tool. There might be some people very new to it. And obviously Pat did a fantastic job of just showing you kind of some of the tips and tricks and things that you do to use it. For me, it's more just around the feel and the using of the tool and why I like it and why it works for me. So first up, I think, is the visual emphasis. It's a Tableau product, so it was always going to be visual. But I think being able to explore the data patterns and looking at the shape of your data visually and quite intuitively is just fantastic. It's impressive. So I've also connected to the same Superstore data set that ships with Tableau Desktop. But I just love the way that immediately I can start looking through my data and start seeing patterns within it. I can see quite quickly that standard class shipping is by far the bulk of the rows. I can see things happening in the consumer space. I can also see things from perhaps a relevance of data point of view. The fact that the country field is only populated with the United States. It's very useful for me when building things in Tableau Desktop in South Africa, because it tells Tableau where I am instead of telling me it can't find any of the geographies. But again, for different fields, the fact that it's either populated with one field or with nothing, could be an indicator for things that you can clean up as you go. But I really do like the layout of it and the fact that you can really start digging into your data very easily, very quickly. The second point I listed was the lack of options, which sounds a little bit like a backhanded compliment, but I genuinely like the way that you aren't presented with this enormous shopping list of options at every turn. So, for example, if I want to add something to my clean step here, we've got some options, but they're fairly limited. For me, the first 5 or 6, certainly not down to things like scripts and predictions. I haven't used those yet, but I'm keen to dig into them. But the fact is, it's very approachable. There are things that you can do. And I think Tableau Prep reveals itself to you in that way. Similarly, I think to Tableau Desktop, that often there's a depth of complexity and a breadth of things that you're able to do. But it's not sort of all thrown at you at once. If I compare this to Ultrix, which is also a tool that I think is fantastic, but it can be quite overwhelming there that you see 400 different connector types that you can drop in at any one point. And I think the whole point around this sort of slightly smaller list means that it's a lot more approachable. You don't get overwhelmed. The tool is much more approachable, and it lessens the severity of the learning curve. I did almost say flattening the curve, but I know that's got a slightly different meaning these days. but for me, I'm entirely self-taught, as I am with most products, and I feel competent already using the tool to create some simple and sometimes not so simple things. There's plenty still to discover, but I think the whole way that this gets approached means it feels very attainable. Then on top of that, if you do get stuck, you've then got the community. And I really can't emphasize enough just how brilliant the Tableau community is across the board. The team in Prep and Data are no exception. And for anyone new to the product, there are always people who are willing to give time. There are people who are willing to give their knowledge to help you along the way. And I think it fosters this nice environment where, as you learn from people and learn from the best, you then get to the point that you want to also share your knowledge and to help and to kind of give back to the community. So I think it really is such a wonderful thing. And really having Prep and Data there and doing the tasks every week has really helped me ramp up my skills over the course of the year. I'm just going to swap to a different flow here. And this is sort of to illustrate my next point, which is around a different thought process and different data. So it's easy to get stuck in a mode of problem solving. I think irrespective of the kind of tools that you use or the kind of the job that you kind of have a method for going at things. And sometimes it can lead to not thinking wider about a problem, and you can become quite siloed in your thinking. So breaking down a problem in Tableau Prep. So this is one from week 6, which is looking at prize money on the various golf tours in the United States. Having to break it down is maybe think more broadly when evaluating any data problem. It's very easy to fall into the trap. I'm a lot more comfortable with desktop, Tableau desktop, and it's easy to sort of think, oh, I can just fix it here and I'll just do it and I'll build this ridiculous calculation and I'll sort of get it done because I'm happen to be here now, and it'll just be faster. But I think I'm becoming more and more actively considered around the right tool for the right job. I've always tried to think that I've got some thoughts around that, but I think it's become more so. It's switched on that part of my brain again from using Prep, and I think it's to the benefit then of kind of the wider data experience for me. It's also exposed me to some different data sets and some interesting data sets, which also kind of can spark your imagination from a visual sense in my case, or there are many ways that just sometimes coming across something you wouldn't have necessarily seen that can fire your imagination. So for this one, again, I talked a little bit about the shape of the data that we see from being able to explore visually, and looking at this, if I look at, say, perhaps the events, that this is the breakdown of the women's and the men's tour in the States. If I click on the PGA, which is the men's tour, and it gives me a nice little visual representation of how many events the men have played, and I look at it from the women's perspective, very little difference. It's quite similarly broken down. But if you look at the money aspect of it, a lot more bias towards the lower end of earnings, and a lot bigger bias on the US side in terms in the male side in the US in terms of the amount of prize money that's available. And I think in some ways I'd always been aware that there was gender bias in terms of monetary reward, but this really kind of brought it home to me. And if I hadn't had the Prep and Data challenge, I might not have seen the data. And as a dad of a young daughter who's showing an interest in golf, it inspired me to build something to highlight it, because I thought, wow, I'm interested in this data set. So if I just share this quickly, and again, this is not about kind of me showcasing a piece of work. It's more around the idea that, I was affected by the data. It was of interest to me. I'd solved a problem in one sense, but I wanted to also bring another problem, I guess, to some attention. So I built this visual, which is just really showing the huge discrepancy. The fact that in a combined list of 50, the top 50 earners, only 2 of them are women and the number 1 and 2 in the world, versus a lot of guys earning a lot of money and a lot lower ranked. Anyway, I'm just going to pop back into PowerPoint to highlight my next point, because I think probably for me, this is the most important thing about Tableau Prep. It's made me very cool with my kids. So as far as my kids are concerned, any tool, any challenge, any conversation, any moment that can involve Pokemon or Pokemon data, as Prep in Data sometimes does. Thanks for that, Jenny. It means instant dad coolness. I say it again, I say it's slightly tongue-in-cheek from the point of view that it has actually got my kids quite interested in data, which is brilliant for me. You know, my son has started playing around in Tableau and trying to build some visuals, and he was very fascinated to check the evolution of Pokemon with me. And for me, it just gives me a chance to rename our good friend Pikachu over there to Chickapoo, just to kind of get on their nerves. So there's always a flip side of the coin. There are lots of things I love about Prep. There are some things that frustrate me. And it's a fairly short list, but I think probably the first one is the canvas. And I think this is just a personal thing. I think a lot of people love how it can be laid out. Other people might find it irritating. I think for me, no matter how many times I use the tool, I keep trying to move things to position them where I want. And then Prep just overrules me and snaps it to the position that it wants to put it in. And it's certainly not a train smash. And obviously things that, for example, that Pat demonstrated around grouping elements together can make the canvas a little bit more manageable. Obviously, you can zoom in and zoom out and pan and so forth. But I do find that as my flows increase in complexity, it can be, I find just the layout and the way it drops things can be a little bit tricky sometimes. And it just sort of slows down my speed through it. The second one, it's a very snappy title. I'm sure you'll agree. But this is this is really down to the price you pay for teaching yourself a tool. And this was that I had a process. If I had an update that needed to happen on a particular field, I would take the old field. I would create a new field with a calculation with a new name. So there will be field 1, and then I would go and delete the old field, and then I would rename the new field. So it looked like in 4 different steps, I'd ended. Sorry, it's my daughter arriving. I'd ended up having, sort of getting to the point of just having an update for a single field. And completely by accident, about a month ago, I created a new field with the same name as one that was there, and it overwrote it. So I could have saved myself a lot of time over the last 6 months. But on the bright side, getting it wrong or having a different process for a long time means I won't forget it. And then there's two other things that I would add. For me, I think it's a shame that there's no certification path, and I put yet on there because there might well be plans afoot for this to happen. It's great to see so much more knowledge going out there and more visibility for Tableau Prep. I certainly think with the clients that I deal with and the kind of market that we're in, there's a heavy sort of kudos placed around getting certified in various different tools. So I think, if it was seen as another skill with a certificate that can be added, I think it would increase some traction here for us. But again, just sort of my opinion. And then I think for this last point around the price of automation, that's really what steers me into perhaps the South African context and where I see things here. So South Africa, for context, it's a highly price sensitive market, and I'm sure we're not the only one in the world. But if a typical conversation in Europe would revolve around features, a frequent South African conversation starts with, is that your best price? And this is not, it's not just for Tableau, it's in many walks of life. So with that in mind, you've kind of got the good and the bad. I would say the good being that being able to position what is essentially a free, powerful data preparation offering is a big plus point for Tableau. I think Tableau as a whole, with the swap to subscription licensing here, has made a big difference and has lowered kind of the entry point for our kind of market. And I think Prep is another tool which is a fantastic thing to have in the arsenal. But then on the flip side, having an exchange rate which often makes the relatively inexpensive into something quite expensive, coupled with an every user pricing model that you get for the automation piece for data management. It means that things can become costly and a difficult sell. And despite the obvious benefits, so the automation portion of it it's harder to sort of get that piece across. But where I see it already playing a role, and I've seen it, at clients and worked on things with people, but I also see it growing in this space is very much in the prototyping and the analysis space. For me, I use it for my own prototyping and projects and bits and pieces. But I think certainly where you've got a company that's embarking on a large data project, in the past, it would have been a data warehouse. Now everyone will talk about a data platform, but there's still this tendency to not bring enough elements to the party soon enough, and to almost go with this sort of huge monolithic project to get the data right before you can let anyone loose on it. And I think this means a user community that's underserviced and underserved, waiting months for data, and not really them being able to give their input. You lose the enthusiasm around the data project itself. Trying to grow a data culture becomes very, very difficult. And for me, in the hands of a good data analyst who understands the business and also understands what Tableau Prep can do, not only can you get this data in front of users quite fast, it can eliminate unneeded data requirements, you can refine your business rules, you can prove the value of the data. And you're kind of getting to that point that by having a sandbox area for people to use that's time boxed, and then the sort of refined and structured data that is going to be useful for business passed into the main project, suddenly you get to this point where everyone's being served, the right pieces are being put into the right projects, and you kind of get the sense of excitement and enthusiasm and momentum, which I think is probably the biggest thing. Okay, so that's really what I had to talk about today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to give you lots and lots of Tableau Prep tips, other than the fact that I would say that getting involved, using the tool, using the challenges that are out there, and utilizing the community to its fullest extent, for me has been a fantastic way to learn, and I think it would be for other people. My next steps will be to keep on learning. I'm going to try and keep my streak going and cling on to the leaderboard for a while longer. And hopefully I'll get some opportunities to pass on what I've learned to help other people discover or rediscover Tableau Prep. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening and taking the time to hear me out. And I'm happy if there are questions or discussions to climb in. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that talk, Nik. Really enjoyed it. Loved hearing your ambitious goals, and you're doing well. You're doing great.
I'm doing great on one, not kind of all four.
The most important one, though. So
of course.
No, it's a really great talk. If there's any more questions, please send them into the chat. We've just got one here from Sylvia that's saying, is there a way to run a prep flow within prep? I think that might be some confusion there around prep conductor, which just automates it, unless you've got a different perspective on that, Nik.
No, I think, that's how I would sort of read that question is, it's so back to the sort of the portion that I mentioned it, I'm seeing a lot of prototyping and things happening, but then the person with Tableau Prep is then physically kicking off the jobs and populating the data that's required. So the sort of expensive automation part that we see the challenge with here would be the fact that then you can schedule all of that happening on the server itself, and you take that kind of manual effort out of it for the analyst.
So Daniel put in a chat that they're using Windows Task Scheduler to automate their prep flows. Is that something you've explored at all?
No, it isn't. But I'll continue making notes off to the side. I think that's the thing with for me. Most of what I've done personally around prep, one has obviously been trying to skill up so that I can have a decent conversation with clients who are people who are actually using it. But also to kind of, I'm attending things like this and getting involved because I'm trying to learn more about how we can do different things. And I mean, there's always the one thing I've seen it over and over from a desktop and particularly a server point of view, if I think more in the traditional visual sense, there's always a way to do something. And there's always kind of a hack or a move or a something that can happen, which sometimes makes people a little bit scared from a licensing point of view, but I try and close my eyes to that. So. But yeah, no, that would be an interesting one to explore.
Yeah, there are always ways of doing that. So yeah, I'd dig into it if I were you. I've not personally done it myself, but I have seen that idea chucked around quite a lot. there is one question from Liam, which I know is probably not directed at you, Nick, talking about Tableau certification paths for Tableau Prep. I don't know, to be honest, is the answer. I think it's something that we all want and have been asking for a while. But with any of these things, Tableau do look at their community forums frequently, and a lot of new ideas and features do come from there. So if you do have ideas and suggestions, whether that's prep functionality or ideas like certification for prep, go and have a look at those forums and submit your ideas. You may well find that your idea is already in there, in which case upvote it, because that's what gets on Tableau's radar, and that's how we get these new features in the product. But yeah, the honest answer is I don't know, but hopefully in the future they will be there. Yeah. Just spam the forums for anything you want, Liam. And then cross your fingers and hope that it happens, basically. Great. So Jenny, unless you have any further questions for Nick, I think we will leave it there.
I'm all good. Thanks so much again, Nick. Oh, there's one more question that's just popped into the chat, into the Q&A, saying, when joining two samples sampled in prep from very large live data sets, does the join only consider the sample values, or does it filter through the whole data set? That's a technical question, which, I mean, I can pass it to you, Nick.
You could, and it'll probably just come straight back, because I genuinely don't know.
So in the workflow itself, it would only be considering the sample values, but when you're running the workflow as a whole, it would output everything, if that helps your question, Callie. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And also I've just seen a comment from Jessica in the chat. So some Tableau certifications are being discontinued. They are sort of doing an overhaul, I would say, of their certifications at the moment. Yes. So I think the last opportunity to book sort of like the desktop certified professional has been and gone. For the rest of them, I think you have to book them. You have to purchase the exam this month in August, and you have to take it by the end of September. But that will then last the duration of the cert. So it's not like they're just going to expire it next year. So if you were to take it now, it would last. But yeah, they are sort of doing an overhaul. And whether prep comes into that is yet to be seen. But fingers crossed. So thank you very much, Nick. As Jenny said, it was a really great session, really interesting to hear your journey and your thoughts. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So just before we finish things off, can you see my screen, by the way? I hope so. Next steps, if you've enjoyed this session or you're getting started with prep or want some ideas, I highly encourage you to join the TTT session that I spoke about earlier. Again, either start at the beginning of the learning path or join into a more intermediate or advanced session, depending on where you're at. You've heard prepping data spoken a lot about today, and I can't preach it enough. It's how I got going with prep. I still do participate from time to time, but not nearly as much as I should. And you're always learning new ways to tackle challenges. And it's a good way as well to sort of stay up to date with the releases of Tableau Prep. Because as Jenny, Tom, and Carl produce the challenges, they'll integrate those new features into the challenges. So there may be a new release that you don't know about, and you can solve a lot of problems that you might be using a workaround to use currently. I can see someone is continuously raising their hand. If you've got a question, maybe put it in the chat. But yeah, prepping data is, go dive into that. Sorry, a bit distracted there. Great way to push your skills and get involved in the community. If you've got an idea for a future session here, or you want to talk yourself, if you go to that link, the till.bi prep talks, then you can submit either a session idea, or you can say you want to present that session, and we'll pick it up and we can get you on board, because it's always good to have new speakers and learn from new people. And finally, Jenny and I run a bi-monthly newsletter, so it falls on the months where we don't do the user group. By signing up for today, you will be receiving that when it comes around in September. So we always put some useful resources in there and information about future sessions. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. Often contains useful like video tutorials, blogs, learning resources, which are great to push your skills further. So that is everything from us. Thank you for joining this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world. We'll be back in October sometime, so keep your eyes peeled for that. As I mentioned earlier, the session was recorded, so we can share that with you tomorrow. But have a good rest of your day, and thank you for joining.